Good evening, everyone. I am Councillor Caroline Culver, Chairman of the Resources and Place Scrutiny Committee. Welcome to this evening's meeting. Members of the committee present this evening are Councillors Dennis Bennyworth, Jeremy Cottam, Eric Pattenden, Christopher Reid, Richard Sumner, and we are due to be joined by Councillor Wollaston. Portfolio holders include Councillor Justin Pemberton. Council officers present to advise and support the meeting are Joseph Holmes, Chief Executive, Sarah Clark, Executive Director for Resources, Martin Sargent, Service Director for Strategy and Governance. Welcome, Martin. Stephen Chard is the clerk for the meeting and Gordon Oliver is the Zoom host. Tonight's meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, so members of the public are able to follow proceedings. If we hear the fire alarm, we must leave the building immediately via the emergency exits. The assembly point is the Dolphin car park. If the lockdown alarm sounds, we will await instructions from officers. We will adjourn the meeting until such time as it is safe to proceed. Finally, I would like to take the opportunity to remind members that we are subject to the Council's Code of Conduct, which requires us to uphold certain standards, including, importantly, respect. We may not always agree with one another, but I would ask that in our disagreements, we are always respectful of others' views. Do members have any questions about the way in which this meeting will be conducted? Thank you very much. Do we have any apologies, please?
We do, Chairman. Thank you. Yes, apologies for absence from Councillor Anthony Amaterage, Laura Coyle and Ross McKinnon. Councillor Dennis Bennyworth is substituting for Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest, colleagues? No. Because we're going to be talking about staffing later as part of the topic of discussion, I'm just going to declare an interest that I am a member of Unison. Right, moving swiftly on. Item 3, local government reorganisation. We're joined this evening by Councillor Justin Pemberton and by officers Mr Holmes and Mrs Clark and Mr Sargent. So over to you, Justin, and then we'll open it up to questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair, and welcome to everybody this evening. Thank you for taking the time to come along to this committee meeting. I will introduce the report that's in front of you. I'm going to give a brief introduction before I talk about what's in the report. And the initial overview will be a very brief summary because, as you've probably gathered, the report itself is lengthy and the appendices, I think, are almost twice as long. In introducing this report, do bear with me. I'm going to be telling you things that you already know, but I just think it's important to cover everything off for the minutes and the recording and all other audits. So in terms of very, very brief background, the reason that we find ourselves here now is following the white paper that the government published back in December last year. So I think it was the 16th of December 2024. Central government issued their white paper setting out some quite far-reaching reforms and things that they wanted to achieve in terms of local government reform. Alongside that, there are also proposals to set up wider strategic authorities, either with or without a mayor, but we're not necessarily here to discuss that this evening. This meeting is purely focusing on the LGR side of things. And what the government said is that rebuilding and reforming local government would essentially be the foundation of that devolution piece, so that wider piece on the strategic authorities that I just mentioned there. In February of this year, so February 2025, the government wrote to the leaders of all two-tier councils. So that's 5 district councils and the county council in Oxfordshire to the north of us, and they asked them to formally submit a proposal for LGR and to provide guidance on the development of proposals. The government asked for interim plans and they were to be submitted by the tail end of March. And those full proposals, which we have in front of you, need to be submitted by the 28th of November. On the 10th of February, West Berkshire Council received a formal request on behalf of South Oxfordshire and Vale of Whitehorse councils to consider the option of a new unitary council covering the 3 areas. and that resulted in the development of an interim proposal that was approved by this council's executive back on the 19th of March this year. As I mentioned a moment ago, the government invited the submission of full proposals by the 28th of November, and details of that proposal is set out in the pack that you've essentially got in front of you. Now, at this point, I should make clear as well that in terms of what we are proposing with South Oxfordshire District Council and Vale of White Horse Council, is part of a wider proposal which is referred to as two councils. So Ridgeway, which would be the merger of ourselves and those other two councils, would form the geographical area to the south of Oxfordshire, obviously along with ourselves. And in the north of Oxfordshire, there is proposed a further unitary authority, which would be known as Oxford and Shires Unitary Authority, and that is an amalgamation of Oxford City Council, Cherwell District Council, and West Oxfordshire District Council. The report that you've got in front of you recommends actions for this committee regarding the proposed reorganisation. We're asking Scrutiny to be informed and acknowledge the collaborative work that's taken place between this council and what is effectively 5 other councils, district councils to the north of us in Oxfordshire. Note the proposal includes a 2 unitary model, which I referred to a moment ago, to effectively enhance local governance and service delivery. To also note that there are other proposals from Oxfordshire County Council, which we can explore in more detail if there are questions relating to that, as well as Oxford City Council. They will also be submitted alongside our 2 councils' proposal for consideration by central government. And if this report is approved following scrutiny of our governance processes and an executive, it will then be submitted directly to government for consideration. As I said a moment ago, it's a long report. So what I've done in terms of this introduction, I've picked out some very, very high-level themes. The report obviously goes into a much more detail than I can sort of cover off now at this particular point in the meeting. But I'll start by talking about the financial implications of the proposal. There are financial implications, as you would imagine, arising directly from a reorganisation of this scale. We have engaged consultants to give us some meaningful numbers around what those costs are and where those costs come from, how quickly those costs will be offset using a financial model. That approach has also been endorsed by SIPFA, who have been involved in those conversations as well. And the savings are broken down in the report based on transition savings and also transformation savings. So there are essentially 2 sets of savings, depending on how ambitious that transformation programme is and how quickly we can effectively merge those various different council systems if and when the 2 unitary authorities go live. In terms of the engagement and the consultation, so the work that was done right at the start of this process, shortly after interim proposals were submitted, I think the proposal, the 2 unitary model that we're talking about here, it highlights some really extensive engagement and consultation efforts to gather feedback, so community feedback, feedback from the parishes, feedback from the business community, feedback from the charity sector, feedback from residents, council officers and myself and other members that came to volunteer did online, so we did online surveys, we did drop-in events, we did sessions with local councils. In terms of the individual responses that we received, they came to almost 2,200, which was in the grand scheme of things, that was far more than we expected. And what we found is a lot of those initial responses came in quite quickly after we began the consultation and those drop-in events towards the early part of June. The officers will have a better grasp of the numbers than me, but I think we had more responses in the first weekend than Surrey had that the entirety of their consultation was running. So there was a really, really deep engagement piece with our residents. But as I say as well, there was also that engagement with those other stakeholders as well. Now, the feedback that again, this is very high level, the feedback that we got indicated a strong preference for the Ridgeway Council model. And that engagement process aimed to ensure that the proposal did reflect those local needs, those local priorities, and what we were hearing during that consultation period. In terms of the timeline and the steps, so how this will kind of shake out, if and when we get the green light for Ridgeway and the two councils' proposal that's in the report in front of members tonight. As I mentioned, those proposals must be with central government by November the 28th. So we're very, very close to that date now. I was really, really pleased that we were able to bring the proposal through full council last week so that members across the district got to have their say. Now, obviously, I'm biased, but I don't think it would be too much of a stretch to say that the comments that we received back during that council meeting endorsed this proposal as well. I heard a lot of positive comments in the room and a lot of constructive feedback from the room as well, which was really, really encouraging to hear. In terms of a decision, obviously, that is out of our hands because that's something within the remit of central government. We are hoping that an announcement is made before the summer recess next year. So we're talking about summer 2026. If civil servants can push through these quicker, we might even have something by Easter. I don't know, but we're working on a provisional date at the moment of next summer. Assuming that happens, what we would then be looking at is effectively shadow elections for those new unitary authorities planned for May 2027. And that removes any kind of disruption to the electoral cycle. It keeps that 4-year cycle in place. It allows residents to have their say whilst avoiding some of the controversy that happened in other parts of the country when elections were cancelled only this year, whilst at the same time having those governance structures up and running in good time to be able to set budgets and to be able to provide safe and legal services if and when the new council goes live sometime around April 2028. And the proposal, the strapline of the proposal is that these unitary authorities are basically aiming to create councils that are large enough to be financially stable, but small enough to remain connected to their communities. I wanted to say a brief word as well about social care transformation and community empowerment. Our view is that the transformation of social care aims to enhance prevention and integration of services, benefiting local communities through improved collaboration and technology. We want there to be an improved focus on prevention and early intervention in areas of social care, but also for children's services and SEND needs as well. We've got an ambitious programme to integrate the provision of housing and homelessness services and to promote affordable housing and local partnership. There is an emphasis here on reducing inequalities and boosting public health and safety through joined-up system working. And there is a commitment to delivering public services which are closer to communities in a more integrated manner. And I think in that respect, West Berkshire Council in particular is in a strong starting position because we've already adopted a lot of those community models, particularly around the community hub, where we've got officers from our teams going out into the community and using the existing infrastructure to take our officers and to take that knowledge out in the community so residents can speak to us without having to come to Market Street or engage with us when those issues and problems that need to be resolved have got to crisis level. So there's something there that we can build on. We've already started that model and we see this as a blueprint for rolling this out if and when we get the green light for the two councils' proposals that's in front of members this evening. I also wanted to make a final comment on the other options which we are effectively competing against. As I mentioned at the start of my piece, this is a proposal which we were asked to join on to. So because obviously councils in Berkshire are already unitarised, the government didn't ask us for proposals. We were approached by Vale and South Oxfordshire to join their proposal as part of the two councils' proposal, which we are submitting to government later this month. We thought that was the best way forward for West Berkshire in terms of safeguarding this council's future, this council's financial future. There's lots of demographic and economic similarities between our district and our neighbours immediately to the north of us. And there's a lot of commonality as well in terms of those market towns and leaning into some of those economies of scale that I mentioned a moment ago. But there are other proposals being submitted to central government for Oxfordshire. One of those is from Oxfordshire County Council, which is a request to effectively unitarise the existing county council. That would create a local authority, a new unitary local authority with the existing Oxfordshire population, which again, the officers may correct me, is around 780,000 residents. And the third proposal is a proposal being led by Oxford City Council, which effectively proposes a greater Oxford city. So the boundaries of Ridgeway and what would be Oxford and Shires, the external boundaries would remain the same, but they would be slightly smaller to account for the fact that Oxford City would effectively be expanding out into their greenbelt area around the periphery. Again, there's some demographics and numbers that are relevant to that particular proposal, which I won't go into now because we can tease them out during the Q&A. But I just wanted members to be aware that there are effectively two rival proposals that are being submitted to central government covering the Oxfordshire County. And I'll finish off by giving a précis of what's in the report. The report begins with an executive summary, which highlights the rationale and key benefits of the proposed changes. There's some background information there on the current local government landscape and the drivers for reform, what the government are trying to do, and the key metrics that they gave us when we were designing this proposal, some of the things that they wanted us to be aware of. There is an options appraisal, which assesses those alternative government governance models considered during the development of this proposal. There's also a section on the vision and ambition of the proposal and the growth offer. So some of the numbers that I was talking about earlier around transformation and some of those long-term savings. And it goes on to describe the economic and community opportunities enabled by the new structure. So some of the stuff that I was talking about around Community Hub and Let's Talk. Further sections cover service delivery and transformation, setting out how the new councils will improve outcomes and efficiency. There is a section on how the councils will work, which explains the governance processes, the partnership and the operational frameworks. There's the financial case, which sets out the assessment of the affordability. It goes into the savings and talks about the investment requirements, while the implementation and engagement summary outlines the proposed transition plan and the stakeholder engagement approach, which I talked about as well in terms of who we spoke to at the start of this process. Finally, there are a set of appendices which present the comparative data, supporting evidence and technical analysis underpinning the proposals. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Pemberton, for that introduction. Officers, did you want to add anything to that before we go to Q&A? No? Okay. Thank you. Welcome. Welcome. Members, do you have questions for Councillor Pemberton? Councillor Sumner.
That's a very good point. Where do you start? Yeah, I totally agree with you. I'm going to start with something which is on my doorstep, and the somewhat aggressive move of Reading Borough Council. And Councillor Pemberton and I have had conversations about, quite a short conversation about the pros of that happening, quite a longer conversation about the cons of that happening. As far as I'm concerned, that was the right way around. But I'd like to have some clarity for residents in my ward and the surrounding wards of how this fits into the conversation. And I can see, I understand that it wouldn't form part of the proposal because it doesn't need to, but I want to understand how that conversation has taken place and whether, should the need arise, there will be an opportunity for further consultation or conversation or both from that. And a slight add-on to that as well, if I may. You mentioned the consultation that took place, and I think actually the response that was announced earlier on is quite a healthy response. Has any demographic analysis been done on that as to whether there was a large persuasion of supporting it from either the east or the west, or was it balanced? Thank you.
So in terms of the process behind what Reading Borough Council are attempting to do around our eastern wards. I'm probably going to refer some of that question to Mrs. Clark, simply because she will have a much deeper technical understanding of how the consultation process will work going forward. What I do know, and I suppose the assurance that I can provide, is that if the Ridgeway proposal falls, automatically Reading Borough Council's requests will fall anyway. So the two are largely contingent on one another, which makes sense from a practical perspective, because if Ridgeway is not going to happen and West Berkshire Council finds itself in a holding pattern until we decide what we are going to do, it would make absolutely no sense whatsoever for us then to be having conversations or continue to have conversations about the fate of those eastern wards. I think, you know, to me, that's self-explanatory. But there will be a consultation process as part of the request that Reading Borough Council have submitted to central government. And I'm looking to my right and wondering if Sarah could maybe add something to that to help understand.
Yeah, so I think the proposal by Reading, I think it's fair to say it's without precedent. Now, these are unusual times, kind of in terms of kind of asking for reorganisation. So Reading have taken that view and are proceeding in light of, and they have stated in response to our proposal to form the new Ridgeway Council. So if that kind of proceeds, there will need to be formal consultation with the Boundary Commission in terms of any proposed changes to boundaries. So there will be a formal process that would need to be undertaken should those proposals be accepted by Reading. So I think that there are some ifs in there at this point. I think there are clearly some strong views out in the east. We had the Theale parish poll last week, which was a resounding kind of Remain vote, in effect, people voting to stay within West Berkshire. So I think that was...
with your terminology.
Sorry, apologies. So I think they did ask them if they wanted to stay part of West Berkshire. So that was, and I think there may be some more kind of that kind of local, very localised surveys. In terms of the consultation, I've just gone on to the consultation survey report. Is an appendix that wasn't actually included in the pack. There is a link to that. So it's on the two councils' websites. I can't see in there that is broken down by postcode area, but we asked people to provide their postcode so we can do some of that analysis if that is considered appropriate. So it's, as I say, I can't see that it's in there, but that could be obtained. I think that there are clearly that we've had lots of meetings with parish councils out in the east of the district. And there are clearly some people who feel that they are very much a part of West Berkshire, but there are other people who equally feel an affinity to Reading. So I think that the democratic processes will be engaged and that will kind of flow through in due course, but there will be further formal consultations. Of course, if Ridgeway is to proceed, there will be a formal consultation with regard to the Ridgeway proposals. If the government decided to advance the Reading proposal to take those wards to the east of the district, that would be subject to a further separate consultation. So there are separate processes that would need to be undertaken, but people, residents, people who have an interest will have the opportunity to respond and give their views on those processes.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Other questions, colleagues? Councillor Bennyworth.
This one, Chairman, thank you very much. Just following up on Councillor Sumner's question, you touched on the 2,500 responses. Presumably that was just within the West Berks context. That's correct, isn't it?
Apologies. Those responses were across Oxfordshire and West Berkshire. So, and they are the people who responded to the survey. In addition to that, there were multiple in-person events that took place. So the number of survey responses, because it has to, in effect, this is around the entire proposal. So it is across the geography, and there were some people, I think, outside of those Oxfordshire or West Berkshire who may also have responded with views. So yes, so it was one consultation across all of that. I think there were separate consultations undertaken by Oxfordshire County Council and Oxford City Council with regard to their kind of proposals, either for a single unitary or for a 3 unitary proposal. So there were 3 in total, and then you've got Reading's as a separate consultation. So lots of engagement.
Thank you very much for clearing that up.
Thank you. Councillor Pattenden.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Pilmington, what you said, I think that if Reading's bid failed, then that this bid is tied to what's going on in Reading, and is that also the case with what the Ridgeway proposal and what may or may not happen over the rest of Oxfordshire? That's the first question. Second question really is, I mean, maybe the crucial one. I mean, what would be the implications for the residents of West Berks if Ridgeway doesn't go ahead?
So again, going back to Reading's intervention, I think it's important to bear in mind that their request for the government to review which council those wards would attach themselves to came quite late in the process. The preparatory work for the Ridgeway Council had begun as far back as March this year. And that's kind of what I want to focus on, because in a sense, the Reading issue has almost become a distraction, hasn't it? The case that we've put forward goes into a large amount of detail, which sets out the case for Ridgeway, why it makes sense in terms of the economics. A lot of thought has gone into the governance structure and what that looks like in terms of political representation. In a sense, although the Reading intervention is not something we can ignore, equally it's not something I want to get sidetracked by, because my view is very much that if the proposal is a strong one, it's one that central government should consider. And I think it is a strong one. I think it's a strong one because of those demographic and economic similarities that I referred to in my opening segment. So those market towns, those similar sized market towns, that kind of rural hinterland, that shared economy around SMEs and startup businesses, complex manufacturing and IT capabilities that we have in this district, leading up the A34 towards Oxfordshire. So it isn't helpful. Reading's intervention isn't helpful, but what I want to focus on is the case for Ridgeway and the proposal that's in front of us here. In terms of what this means for West Berkshire if the government says no to Ridgeway, I think the simple answer to that is we're in a holding pattern. So if we know that Ridgeway isn't a goer, there's no, as I mentioned a moment ago to Councillor Sumner, the Reading conversations stop at that point. We have to think about what happens next for Berkshire. In a sense, it's a process of elimination, isn't it? Because we're talking about going north. We're looking to partner up with those district councils to the north of us. Well, we can't go south because Hampshire's already in stage 1 of that LGR process anyway. They're further along than we are. They've had more conversations with central government, so that's off limits. You can't go west to Wiltshire because Wiltshire Council is already a unitary authority with 500,000 people anyway. So there's an obvious blocker there. That leaves the east. Well, to the east of us is Reading. The government have been fairly clear in terms of what they want these new unitary authorities to look like in terms of the population size, which is 500,000. Well, you can pretty much work out how many unitary authorities within Berkshire you would need to kind of hit that magic number. But obviously, if and when we get to that stage, we'd have to finesse those conversations at that time. But that's what I think the implications are. I don't know if the officers want to come in at this point, but what I did want to very quickly make the point, if I may, if central government is listening to this, if you actually look at the geography of it, and you look at, say, Oxfordshire County Council's proposal to just change their unitary into their county council into a unitary, there are a number of reasons why that doesn't make sense. But the starkest, looking at that map, is that you would then end up with a unitary authority that's 50% bigger than the baseline population that the government has asked it to be. And then West Berkshire immediately to the south with 165,000 residents, far below that number, which is in receipt of exceptional financial support. That alone should be enough for the government to go, oh, that probably wouldn't work. So I'm hoping that when government does think through all of this and decide which one to go for, that's at the forefront of civil servants' minds.
Mr. Holmes?
Sorry, I was thinking more though, and maybe, you know, this to the sort of wider group. I mean, what does a holding pattern mean? You know, does that mean, you know, things have to, I mean, for residents, what does that actually mean? That's what I was trying to get at.
Thank you very much, through you, Chair. So I don't have a crystal ball, so I do not know how long the remaining unitaries would be in place for, and what government's appetite will be for consolidating all unitaries to a number that represents a population of about 500,000 people. We haven't had that formal letter yet, so to that point, we remain in that pattern. However, the devolution white paper was very clear that the government's aspiration is to get to every council to be a unitary around the 500,000 population mark, and by leaving the Berkshire unitaries and some of the other smaller unitaries in the country, you'll have a really quite significant disparity between unitaries here serving populations below 200,000 people and other unitaries sort of 600,000 and much higher as well. So that would feel a job half done, but at the end of the day, it is up to central government to determine that. I just had a couple of other points. So I've just got the list here of the most recent unitaries that have been set up, just to give members an idea of the sort of size. These are the latest figures as well. So some of these were set up 4 or 5 years ago, and their populations would have risen. But you've got Somerset there at 488,000 people, North Yorkshire 627,000, Cumberland at 280,000, Westmoreland and Furness 230,000, West Northamptonshire is 440,000, North Northamptonshire is 374,000, Buckinghamshire is 553,000, Dorset 389,000, Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole 408,000. I've not done an average of those, but it's going to be looking at it somewhere around about the 400,000 to 450,000 mark, which strangely enough is very similar to the two proposals that are in front of you this evening. I can actually also just answer a question that Councillor Sumner raised earlier, which was around the difference between the eastern responses and the overall responses that were received. So I did actually ask this information a few months ago because I was interested in it, perhaps the similar reasons to you. Actually, there's, from the statistics I've got in front of me, pretty little variance actually between the east specifically and the overall respondents. So if you look at some of the questions, I won't read them all out because we'll be here all evening, but if you look at some of the economic priorities, you know, creating new jobs was 26% overall as one of the highest level ones. It was 25% in the eastern area. So 2 or 3% differences, but there was nothing when I spoke to Martin Dunscombe, our communications manager here, that of course there were a few that were different, but I think probably for the committee, the overall picture was one of quite a lot of similarity actually between what those respondents who were in the East said compared to the overall respondents.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Cottam and then Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Bit of deja vu because I was on Newbury District Council for many years and had this done unto us. I have concerns about what we're doing here. There was a bright light on localism and representing people's thoughts, and having a unitary authority this size basically was a very good prospect it was basically damaged because when the budget for Berkshire County Council was divided up, 10 million extra went to Reading and 10 million extra went to Slough. I hope that this time there will be no political shenanigans again like that, where we had to find from the word go 10 million pounds worth of savings because of that unfair, unjust distribution of funds. That's one of the big concerns, because another one is the Sen. Are they going to do something about the funding for these new authorities on the Sen? If we haven't got a clear picture of what they're doing on that, then why do it? Seriously, what is the point if we don't fix that elephant in the room? It is the biggest problem facing nearly every authority, and we're going through this. And because we're being told to do this, we have no choice to do this. I wouldn't start where we are now, but we have to do what central government tells us. It's very, very clear. So I have the concerns of, those are the two major financial concerns. And then there's localism. It's a very big report, and I've gone through it lightly, I have to say. But answer me this question, is what about as I said, it was a three-tier authority. We had the parishes, especially the town councils, the district council, the unitary authority council. And the number of councillors was a compromise between that. And I think it was a very good one. Maybe a bit too generous, but the old county council seats were 1.5 for the whole of Thatcham. Really? I mean, how are you going to get about finding out people's opinions at that type of level? And I'm getting the feeling that's what we're looking at again now. To me, the only solution to this is raising the profile of the town and parish councils, getting an input from them. When they work together with the Newbury district, they achieve huge things, like the 3 swimming pools, the Hennick playing fields and things like this, which town council couldn't even dream of doing either in Hungerford or Mortimer or Thatcham. It just was not possible. So, you know, the very best of the district council was the recreation and amenities and the planning. I mean, so that, of course, planning is being eviscerated anyway, so we're not going to have much say in that much longer. I can imagine that's another thing, a question we might ask is, really, how much of planning decisions are going to be even available to this new greater Ridgeway? Sorry, that's a lot of questions in one sentence, but thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so if I deal with kind of democracy and also kind of around parish councils. So in terms of the number of councillors, at the moment we have in Ridgeway there are a total of 142 councillors serving at both the kind of county and district level, and under the proposal that would be reduced to 96. Now, of course, in Oxfordshire, for West Berkshire, that represents, there would be 5 fewer councillors, it's proposed, in West Berkshire. So in order to produce, in effect, a proposal that could go to government and government could accept without doing kind of boundary changes, because that's what they've said we want to avoid, and certainly complicated boundary changes, that members in 3-member wards in West Berkshire, that would be reduced to 2, and in Oxford, South Oxfordshire and the Vale of Whitehorse, they would use the county council division, so their electoral divisions. So the majority of that reduction happens in South Oxfordshire and Vale of Whitehorse across that Ridgeway geography. And of course, that's part of that challenge of the 2-tier kind of form of local government, because you've got kind of councillors elected to the district councils, looking at those district council functions, and then a separate cohort of councillors, although many of them are dual-hatted, but that they sit on the county council as separate. So that is the bulk of that reduction. So for West Berkshire residents, that remains largely unchanged. You're absolutely right around that challenge in that larger geography around how do we stay connected to our communities. And I think it's fair to say, if you look at the geography even of Berkshire at the moment, West Berkshire is half that geographical area, and we are a small unitary authority. So that challenge of being connected to our communities is a challenge that we already face. So how do we tackle that? And I think that is set out in the proposal in terms of how we would, that neighbourhood governance. And actually we have leaned into and stated explicitly that we would build on that relationship with town and parish councils because they understand their communities. We would have approximately 200 at the moment. There are about 200 town and parish councils across that Ridgeway geography. So we would need to develop, the new council, if that is created, would develop, is stated in the kind of document, to make that, ensure that we are engaging with them where they want to use those powers, because I think, again, we were eager, and I think from the feedback that we'd had, there were some parish councils that were clearly eager to step up. There were others who were kind of eager not to be, I think, have functions passed to them where they were not part of that conversation. So I think there is a real need for the new authority to develop those proposals with the communities that are impacted, so with the town and parish councils and with the residents. But I think there is clearly a vision where we envisage that we will lean into that. And I think that's one of the areas where there is a distinction between the proposals for Ridgeway and the proposals for Oxford and Shires, because Oxford at the moment is not parished, or I think there might be one or two. So the kind of city of Oxford doesn't have parish council, so they can't operate the same model because that infrastructure in effect doesn't exist in the same way that it does at the moment across Ridgeway. So I think we hear, and I think we really value at the moment that contribution, and I think that is something that we would seek to build upon and enhance in a new Ridgeway model. So I think there were, I will stop there, and whether I come back later to timescales. I think Joseph wanted to come in on finances.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, through you, Chair. So thank you. So a couple of questions there, one around sort of finances, savings, etc. One around special education needs and disabilities and that wider picture. So I think the first one, the immediate sort of savings and the resilience piece. If you go to page 69 of the pack, that just has a summary from CIPFA, so Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy. So we have engaged CIPFA as well as PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, to do some comparable pieces of work across the proposals. And you can see in the CIPFA Financial Resilience Index there, they're really trying to drive a variety of measures. And again, all of this, I'm sure we'll come onto this further in the discussion tonight. All of this is modelling, so it is a pure model. But it shows that the second option has the best level of financial resilience across the three options, and certainly better than West Berkshire on an individual level. So I think that is a strong piece to the Ridgeway as well as the Oxford and Shires Unitary Authority proposals, that option 2, we believe, has the strongest level of financial resilience together. I think on the send piece, there's a little bit actually in this report on this towards the back of the report. I'd say two things. So one, we are waiting for the SEN white paper, expected now next year. We have been waiting for quite a period of time for this to come through and to see what the implications of it will be. Ridgeway, no Ridgeway, LGR, no LGR. until that reform comes, it is that will determine the future. However, I think, and as this report highlights, being on this larger footprint does have a benefit under the current system in place around the SEND agenda. So there are some benefits there, but the key thing around SEND is that we are waiting for the government's white paper and sort of future reforms there.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, this has gone through a vote, and maybe we should have actually declared that people that have voted for it. So I did vote for it. Very much my heart was behind this, but had a number of concerns. One, which was the democratic deficit, which was raised. And I think the leader of the council did say when he was a county councillor that he looked after about 11,000 people. However, that's for a significant different set of services than a unitary. And obviously things have changed significantly over the last 25 years. I believe a lot of the services provided by councils now were some time ago provided by NHS or never provided before, certainly not at the scale that they're currently being provided, as we just talked about for SEN. I think also considering the Rural Services Network has written extensively on this, considering that Ridgeway will be pretty much extensively a rural area, and it's not just the evidence, it's a fact that government grants for rural areas are significantly lower than they are for urban areas. We pay more tax than urban areas. So I think people will be seriously considering what's the business case behind this as well. And I do wonder, actually, the grants that go to rural areas is disgraceful from government. I have to say that. And I do think we maybe should be asking our MPs to represent us that we won't be impacted unfairly. As we talked before, we were caught out previously 25 years ago. It sounds like we were shortchanged the £10 million there that we had to find in further savings. We don't want that to happen again. But certainly the business case, which goes into this report, I think, which starts really from page 124, I think, the financial business case. I'm kind of interested really in hearing a bit more about, the low savings, the mid savings, the high savings, the ambitious, and how the authors of the report came to those quite a lot of assumptions that I can see in this report. If I keep going through it, I see another assumption, I see another assumption. There are savings on, IT systems, and it's difficult to follow, actually. It is quite scattered between the various different options, the various different things. It would be nice to have seen, actually, a business case set for one option all parcel together and another, but it's been done now. We've paid our money, I guess. I don't want to ask for it to be redone. I think what are the biggest risks on this transformation is what I'd like to hear. We've got to do a transition. It's like any company. If I was a shareholder sitting here and I was hearing, oh, okay, here comes another merger and acquisition coming along. What's the risk? What lessons learned have we made from other ones that have heard? It sounds like Somerset has gone through this, as has Northamptonshire and various other areas, to become bigger areas. What options are where we can just actually transfer data from one IT system to another and just run with it and switch off and walk away from those license fees? Or are there massive risks? Are there lots of compensations that we need to pay for those suppliers? Lots to be bundled in there, but I think, what am I really asking for? What are the business case risks from experience that other councils have found?
You want to go first?
I'll come in initially on the governance and democracy side of things, and if it's okay with the officers, I'll hand over to them and let them talk about the money, if you like. We did discuss this briefly, albeit at full council the other evening, around what that representation piece looks like in terms of our local councillors. Sarah's already gone through the numbers in terms of a raw comparison around what Ridgeway looks like now to what it will look like post Ridgeway if it happens at all. And it's not a perfect solution. So from a West Berkshire perspective, it was a sort of a crude, well, let's look at these 3-member wards. We can probably drop them down to 2. That gives us 38 members and it's 96 altogether across the piece. Time was very much of the essence. The priority had to be getting a submission together that was in a condition that we could submit and that was a serious proposal and that government could consider by the deadline. So that was the initial imperative of that piece of work and the thinking behind how that representation looks like. There is a wider conversation to be had around the impact that will have on local representatives and local councillors. I think I mentioned on the night, it does have the effect of pushing up the average number of electors per ward. It does. I'm not going to deny that. But I don't think it's necessarily out of kilter with other similar sized unitaries. Obviously, there's a conversation piece to be had around the pressure that puts on our local representatives, how big is their area, that kind of thing, and that sort of thing. But it gives us a workable proposal, and that's something that we can submit now that's realistic. The issues that you raised around rural issues, it makes perfect sense that you would raise those representing the rural ward that you do. And I think there's a lot in what you've said that I absolutely agree with. We're not here to talk about devolution tonight. This isn't a conversation about those strategic authorities. But with LGR, there is also an opportunity to lean into some of those strategic reforms and those strategic authorities, with or without a mayor. We haven't got to that stage in the conversation yet. Because what central government want to be doing when they're talking about these really knotty rural issues, so some of the issues that affect your ward and other rural wards around farming, around antisocial behaviour, around crime, around our highways network, what central government wants to be doing is they want to be speaking to a group of mayors rather than lots and lots of council leaders. So I think there is an opportunity there in terms of that structural piece and those funding questions and dealing with some of those issues in your ward that require some of those financial solutions. I'll stop there and I'll hand over to the officers to talk more about the financial case, because they will almost certainly be able to give a much more detailed answer than me. Thank you.
So I will touch on some things, and I'm sure Joseph will also kind of contribute in terms of that financial business case, because I think you'd kind of asked what around sort of some of those risks around kind of service delivery and some of those kind of transformation gains. I think in terms of if Ridgeway is approved, actually that kind of focus for kind of day one, I think really is having safe and legal services. As a unitary or an upper tier authority, clearly you've got responsibility for a number of really important social care functions. And so there will be a priority around ensuring that kind of children who are looked after, adults who need kind of support, continue to receive those essential services. So that will be very important. I think in terms of some of those, I suppose what you would imagine are the obvious benefits of having a single tier of government and actually a larger commissioning power. Those benefits really will fall through over time, because contracts will have an end date. Those contracts won't end sooner. Unfortunately, I think until the government decide which proposal they want to go to adopt, there is the ability for government to introduce secondary legislation once they're into that kind of rhythm that will in effect enable us to work around, if you like, the procurement legislation, because at the moment we are kind of compelled to operate with that. So I think what we see and what we've seen since this proposal was announced are some really large contracts that have been awarded. And for example, West Berkshire Council is currently in the process of looking at our highways term maintenance contract. That is one of the biggest contracts that we have. And we have to keep going down that route because procurement means that we can't extend that contract without falling foul. So I think the sooner the government kind of make that decision and enact some secondary legislation to kind of give us a pause or some breathing space on those contracts so that we can start to take advantage of that kind of expanded buying power, the better. So I think that is a challenge. In terms of those service delivery risks, actually, the transition plan in the document kind of sets out actually how that programme is envisaged to be set up. So you will have different programme teams looking at kind of ensuring that transition of data, etc., is all managed carefully. In terms of day one, my ideal and what would obviously deliver the most benefits would be having a single system. So if you had West Berkshire Council's infrastructure, we are already a unitary, and you could feed the data in, then that would be potentially ideal. But no doubt there will be challenges in getting that kind of data migrated. So I think we're not sufficiently into the detail. We're kind of commissioning work around and kind of commissioned as part of this work around the IT system so that you can start to see what are the opportunities there around systems and rationalising those. I think there are some clear wins there because at the moment you've got kind of 7 authorities in effect with housing benefit systems, housing systems, planning systems. Actually, so you go into kind of, under our proposal, there'd be 2 systems. So I think that those are clear wins. In terms of the modelling, I think it is a model. And I know Joseph will come in there, but we engaged PricewaterhouseCoopers to give us that external view. We needed to have some basis upon which we could look at the 3 different proposals using a single data set. So what we have is a kind of a data set that was agreed and approved by the Section 151 officers, but there are an awful lot of assumptions in there. We don't know what the landscape will be in 2 years. We don't know what the demands will be in 2 years. So I think it is fair to say that there is a note of caution on some of those figures. I think experience of other authorities, which you'd referred to, and learning from that, the LGA has created a number of LGR hubs, so there are learning hubs, and people from those authorities are participating in that and sharing their experiences. I think the experience of many is that when they have used the models of our external agents, experts to forecast savings, etc., they haven't always delivered because the reality is kind of different when you're dealing with increasing demands, for example. So you can forecast what rises might be, but you have to deal with the reality of that situation. So I think there are a number of challenges, but that is why we also commissioned SIPFA to do that resilience piece. So not only is there PwC who is engaged and worked closely with the Section 151 officers from the authorities who are promoting the 2 unitary proposal, and actually the 151 officers from Oxfordshire County, I think, and City also participated in that, establishing the evidence base so that could feed into different proposals. But I think you've not only got that, but you've also got SIPFA who did that kind of resilience piece. So you've got external assurance on the kind of financial case that was provided by PwC. So I think it is not guaranteed. There are some clear wins that you're going to get. And I think the statutory officers are, for example, a really clear example of where you will get some efficiency gains, because at the moment you've got monitoring officers for each of those councils. That's 5 in Oxfordshire because you've got South and Vale already with the joint kind of officer cohort, but 1 here. So that will be 6 down to 2. 6 down to 2 chief executives, 6 down to 2 Section 151 officers. You'll still have 2 DCSs, but that is also the benefit of our proposal, is that in those upper tier areas, actually there are already established teams and you've got those kind of most senior officers who carry that responsibility and the understanding of the needs of those services also in place. So I think that there are lots of benefits in that, along with some risks. And I don't know if Joseph wanted to add anything else.
Yeah, Mr. Holmes.
That's good, Chair. So thank you. So that was very comprehensive, but I'll try and just add a few additional pieces in on this. So you can see this is based from PwC's work across lots of other different councils. So I think to an extent that gives us assurance, especially as we've commissioned them externally. I read out 9 other councils recently, but on top of that, Surrey will have, we know now, headed off into 2 unitaries pretty shortly, actually, by next year. So we have the learning there to call upon. I think to your point around risk, I think that is a really crucial one here. As Sarah said, we've got the transition plan in here. We'll learn from other authorities and some of the sort of pitfalls they had. I've had a look through some of the other councils' business cases who then did become unitaries. I won't say which, but there was one which was forecast for their establishment to sort of go down to about 4,000 FTE. It's currently over 5,000 FTE. So there's clearly a gap sometimes between how the world is perceived and actually how the world is. But we've commissioned them to give us that the external look here. If you go to page 127, that sets out some of the sort of the day one income and expenditure account position there, and it doesn't portray a totally sort of frightening financial position from day one. Now, of course, I think it actually portrays a sound and positive financial position. Sort of showing the need for there's a budget gap there of £4.9 million for each of the respective authorities, which on a budget of £550 million. I think would be eminently achievable, especially given some of our historic savings targets, similarly to the other councils in the other area. So it posits a very resilient financial position, which I think is strong, and that is going to be one of our greatest risks here. I think the other big risk here, which this paper it's impossible for it to address, is what comes out of the budget nationally in the next sort of month, and then the fair funding review by the end of December. And you mentioned the point around rural funding and support for councils in rural areas. That will be a key point which we'll be very interested in having a look at how the government's addressing that in the fair funding review. Again, what I'd say is one of the benefits to this proposal compared to, say, West Berkshire on its own is, to Sarah's point around that commissioning, that procurement piece across a bigger area, but an area which has a very similar demography, should lead to financial benefits, because we'll be able to have contracts and ways of working that are scalable to a larger scale than we have at the moment, with a very complementary set of demographics and a population basis on which we can commission.
If I can just follow up, going from the really big picture, and thank you very much for that, excellent answers, down to the much smaller ones. So some of us in our wards will have local parishes. Some of them are quite small. So I've got some relatively big hitters like Bucklebury, who've well staffed with councillors and can pretty much look after themselves. And we've got smaller ones like Midgham, which has got 130 houses. They're looking, and in fact, they'll be voting at this moment whether to put forward the start of their neighbourhood development plan. Will it, considering they take 4, 5, 6, 7 years to do, is it really worth their effort now to put this forward, considering what's happening? Is it going to impact those kind of little things that are going to go on for the smaller parishes?
So I think at this point, to some extent, some of that is business as usual. So I think there are clearly plans within the sort of strategic authority around some of that strategic planning and kind of housing sites. But I think there will still clearly be a need at that local level to control sort of planning and development in those areas. So I think there, in my opinion, there is still benefit. And I think to Joseph's point earlier, I think somebody had raised around that kind of potential timetable. So one, at this point, we don't know whether Ridgeway will be accepted by government. If it doesn't, what next? I think in terms of that timetable, when the government issued their kind of white paper back in December, they had said that their priorities were around two-tier areas, but also small unitary authorities, and particularly those in financial distress, i.e. those in receipt of exceptional financial support. So we had anticipated receiving our kind of communication from government very early on. I think the reason that hasn't come out is because the government can use existing legislation to address two-tier areas, and that enables them to bring in a neighbouring authority. So West Berkshire kind of can piggyback onto the existing legislation, but it requires new legislation to kind of deal with the smaller unitaries. So they need new primary legislation. So there are lots of things that need to take place before, if Ridgeway doesn't happen, that alternative. So to the kind of, I think Joseph said he didn't have a crystal ball. Obviously, I don't have one either. But I think certainly we require legislation, and then there will be then no doubt the processes that will then invoke. So I think to the parishes having their neighbourhood development plans, if they want to control development in their area, and I think there are other benefits, then they would certainly, I think, be well advised to continue to do that, to kind of continue to operate. I think in terms of how planning would change as well, because I think we had questions around local plans, etc. They will all remain in place for a period. So that day one question, all of those kind of planning policies, etc., the local plans also remain until you've had that opportunity to look at the larger area. So I think continue at this point.
Thank you.
Mr. Holmes.
So then just one last sort of reflection on that is, I think for me, a key part of the proposal that we have here is, Sarah mentioned the words legal and safe, and of course that's absolutely crucial. But this is of the options the least disruptive from the point of view that you already have two upper tier councils here, and ourselves in that we run unitary council services at the moment. So if this is the approach that is gone down, I actually think this is the one which has the greatest opportunity to get going from day one, because I think it's important that we're ambitious for our residents, that it's not just, and I know it's a huge just, it is absolutely crucial that the services are safe and legal, but a lot of work's gone into this, so a lot of cost will go into it. It's crucial that we make the most of that opportunity, so that actually from day one, residents are starting to see things change, and that we harness the benefits of all of those respective councils.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to ask something myself, and then I'll come to Councillor Wollaston. Just building on what was just discussed vis-a-vis contracts and extensions to contracts, I'm conscious that Vale and South are going to be renewing their waste contract next year, and that they currently use the county council for disposal. So if the merger was to go ahead and we ended up having to take on the disposal for their contract from 2028, what kind of impact would that have on the contracts? And when you mentioned about the extensions and the secondary legislation, is that something that would pertain specifically to our merger? Have they done that for previous LGR exercises?
So I think that there had been a conversation in an early meeting, and actually I went and looked. There is a provision in the Local Government Public Involvement in Health Act 2007 that says secondary legislation can be enacted. I think that is likely to be kind of authority specific. So where there is a need, they will enact that. And I would imagine it would be fairly standard, but that will have to be brought in. In terms of the timings, I think that kind of contract in particular sounds like that's probably going to miss the boat. So again, some of these feel like missed opportunities, perhaps, because if we're going to, well, I think the government have stated very clearly this is our intent. So potentially pausing some of those contracts, if they don't have the power to do so, that will be the challenge and why those contracts are rolling through. If that contract is awarded, then what will happen is that you will likely be operating with dual systems for different parts of the area for a period of time until those contracts can be rationalised. And if there isn't an easy kind of break clause, if you like, in the contract, then the likelihood is you will let them run and you'll plan to kind of merge them further down the line to get those benefits rather than paying for a service that you're not utilising. So that is what I would anticipate would happen, although clearly you'd need to get into the real detail to give a definitive view.
I think the reality of that is the bin regime, for example, would probably look different for the two areas of our, proposed merger for quite a while to come. And I suppose one of the big challenges is to manage people's expectations. On day one, you're not suddenly going to have a brand new bin regime that covers the whole area. I mean, I'm conscious that in Vale and Vale of White Horse, I think they have one bin for recycling, for example, whereas we do more curbside recycling. And we've been told at Scrutiny before that as a result of doing more curbside, we have less contamination of our recycled waste. So there's going to be all kinds of different considerations there. I was at an LGA conference last week and Somerset actually said one of the biggest lessons for them is just to make sure that you don't fall over on day one and to manage expectations that a lot of things are going to take quite a long time before you see any difference.
Yeah, I think that those differences in services are probably a really good example of actually, and in terms of that focus, safe and legal on day one, and actually making sure that bins are still collected on day one, because that's really important. You're not likely to get significant service change then, but that might be an area where you could start to get standardisation, and actually you will even managing it through two different contracts. Because actually what you would want is all of your residents to be experiencing the same level of service. So, we would hopefully learn from best practice in two different areas to get the best outcome for all of our residents.
Thank you. Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you, Chair. Again, sorry I was late and I apologise this has been covered in the introduction. I'm interested in the electoral implications because the report is sort of slightly vague over whether we're going to go for elections in 2027 or whether it's going to be 2028. It's like some clarification.
Thank you. Who'd like to take that? Councillor Pemberton?
Yes, thanks very much, Councillor Wollaston. So as of this moment, the plan is to continue with the current electoral cycle. So elections will take place in May 2027. By that point, we should have almost certainly had an answer from central government as to whether or not Ridgeway is a goer. And if it is, those elections will effectively be taking place for the shadow authority. That authority will vest, so it will legally become operable in April 2028. But you'll have those elections the previous year, so that your representation is confirmed. Those councillors have already been elected, and then there will be that period between the elections and vesting day where the officers will be engaged in making sure that those services can be provided on day one. So setting budgets and making sure that the relevant infrastructure is in place, etc.
Thank you. Just so I'm clear then, so from 2027 to 2028, we'll be down to the 30, whatever it is, councillors, and they will operate the same way as we do at the moment in West Berkshire Council, and then just move on to the Ridgeway Council after that.
So I think if Ridgeway is approved by government, what I anticipate is that they will extend the term of the current cohort of members of West Berkshire Council. So in effect, the term of office would be extended to 2028. So instead of having elections to West Berkshire Council in 2027, the period of office for those members will be extended to 2028. We will, however, have elections, and there will be a cohort of members who are elected as members of the new Ridgeway Authority. So in effect, and they will sit as they're termed the shadow authority. The reason that it's really important to have those members in place then is because only members can appoint, for example, the chief executive. So it will be members of that shadow authority who will appoint a new chief executive. So on vesting day, you have a chief executive, you have your statutory officers, you have your senior leadership team. So all of that is in place. So yes, and you've got the kind of budget set as well. So on vesting day, the new authority can in effect start to operate, and then would then be a period where from the 1st of April 2028, where in effect you will close down the accounts, etc., of the authorities that have that will no longer exist legally, such as West Berkshire Council. So have I not explained that clearly?
You have explained, but it seems to be a ridiculous idea to me. Why don't we just elect the 38 for the year between? Because otherwise you've got 5 councillors in limbo effectively who can vote on some things but not on others. No,
I think so. I haven't explained myself clearly. The members of West Berkshire Council will not alter. So if Ridgeway goes ahead, the current members of West Berkshire Council will remain members of West Berkshire Council for another year. So legislation will extend the period of office of the councillors. So West Berkshire Council will continue, instead of continuing to 2027, the members of West Berkshire Council will remain members of West Berkshire Council till 2028. Now, there will be elections to a new Ridgeway Council. You could have an entirely different cohort of members stand for election, and they would be like that. So those elections will take place to a separate body. So it's a separate legal body that there will be elections for.
I have to say, I think that's absolute madness.
Okay.
But it's the same across the whole country, Councillor Wollaston. It's not as if it's some scheme that we've invented.
Potentially there where someone, I don't know, dies, for example, in time, and then you have to have a by-election for 6 months. I mean, it's crazy.
Can I just ask for clarification? I know in the document, I think in one place it says the election of the Shadow Council will take place before the 1st of April. And then I think somewhere else it says May 2027. Can I just seek clarification about that? Because presumably the town and parish council elections will go ahead in May 2027. So would the shadow elections be on the same day?
I would anticipate that it will be, because that it saves on all the infrastructure being duplicated. So that's what I would imagine would take place.
So where it says before the 1st of April, then that's not actually the case.
Sorry, I was just about to make a note, because we have tried our best to avoid any inconsistencies, but there have been lots of contributions. So, and if you have those details, I'd be happy to take those down after the meeting.
Okay.
And so that we can have that corrected. Thank you.
Okay. Did you have any other questions, Councillor Wollaston, about that particular point?
No, that's fine, thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that. I've got a few questions, if I may, scrolling up and down. Councillor Pemberton, you mentioned about homelessness and housing. I know that we have around 100 properties, and I believe Vale and South have got about 100 as well. So that would give us 200 altogether, and I understand that's the threshold for establishing a housing revenue account. And I was just wondering if any thought had been given to whether we would seek to do that and use that as a fund that we could borrow against and perhaps aspire to have our own council houses in the future?
In terms of the technicalities, that's probably a question for the housing portfolio holder. I don't want to say something that is factually incorrect. What I would say is that I think strategic decisions like that are decisions for the members. I certainly wouldn't want to preempt what those newly elected members would wish to do. And I don't think it's too much of a stretch as well to say that, you know, wrapped up within that question are some political decisions as well around funding and priorities and economies of scale and the like. So I appreciate that that's a fairly non-committal answer, and I also accept that in saying that South Oxfordshire and Vale do approach their asset stock slightly differently to we do. I don't know if there is anything that the officers can add, but I think the answer to your question is probably a takeaway, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you. We are looking at social housing at our meeting on the 25th of November as well, so we will talk in a bit more detail about that. But yeah, it'd be nice to get a bit of a sense of what our ambitions might be, what opportunities are opening up as a result of this. Mr. Holmes.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There is a little bit around housing delivery on page 104 of the pack, and you can see some of the, and again, I think this is some of the opportunities here is if you look in the Oxford and the Shires area, Oxford City Council has an HRA housing revenue account. And of course, that wouldn't be in the Ridgeway area, but it does open up the opportunity for how do we share learning. The previous councils I've been at have all had housing revenue accounts. So the one thing I'd say is to have an HRA at the level of sort of 200-300 homes would be very difficult. Normally HRAs are operating on thousands of homes, so you can spread some of the sort of major repairs costs over a much larger basis. But that's not to say that absolutely all of them operate at that level. And I think as Councillor Pemberton said, it's absolutely one that I think the new council would be interested in exploring, and being over that larger footprint perhaps gives it a greater opportunity if it wished to open an HRA than being over the existing footprints of the lower tier councils at the moment.
Thank you. I was going to ask about staffing. Now, obviously, this could potentially be quite a sensitive topic, and there will no doubt be a certain amount of anxiety about what might be coming over the hill. Can you give us a bit of an idea about the kind of consultation that you've done with staff so far on this and what your plans would be going forward? I understand that the council is considering recognising Unison, and again, I state my declaration of interest there. I understand that Vale and South do already recognise them, and I don't know whether some of the staff also, maybe in the resource centres, I think work for Unite, maybe. So I don't know, have we got some proposals in place to make sure that if the merger goes ahead, all of the staff are on an equal footing across the three existing councils when it comes to unionisation and consultation about what's happening?
So I think some of that detail we have not got to yet, because that would be part of the kind of transition kind of proposals that would start to be developed in far more detail when the government, I'm speaking when the government give us the green light. So I think to some extent that hasn't been worked out at this point, but I think in terms of how that would operate, you would have to move towards standardisation. Whether that would happen on day one, I can't say at this point. But I think you, in order to operate in the most effective and efficient manner, that is what you would want to do. So I think, yes, that is where we are now. And in terms of the unions and certainly our recognition agreement, we are, that the conversations are taking place with Unison, but the idea is that we have a form of agreement that can be extended as required if other unions kind of come forward and wish to have that kind of recognition. So I think all of those things would be put in place, and those kind of staff consultations, etc. In terms of consultation to date, so we haven't done a separate consultation, if you like, with staff. Staff have been told about the survey. We've encouraged staff to participate in that. We have Let's Chat sessions, which is kind of the kind of executive leadership team sort of engaging with staff, and staff can raise issues. So we've kind of spoken to the staff there about where we are in the proposals. I think Joseph does a chief executive update, that there have been kind of several updates on that. So I think staff are aware of the proposals kind of going forward. I think my observation, and obviously I haven't spoken to everyone, but generally staff feel kind of quite engaged in this process and see those opportunities that will come from that kind of change, which, given that we have, I suppose, decided to engage in this, I think that speaks really well of the officer cohort. So, yeah, so I'll stop there. I don't know, Joseph.
Yeah, okay, Chair. Just to add to what Sarah said there, so yeah, we have been doing regular briefings around LGR and the proposals here, to the point that I've had some staff saying, please stop talking about the Ridgeway and talk about some other things. And then other staff saying, no, I want to find out more, I need to understand more. And of course, that's absolutely right. And we will continue to do so. I suppose the difference for us compared to some of the Oxfordshire councils is that it's not such an existential change from the point of view that those councils will be abolished in 2028, whatever happens. All of them, one format, will be abolished. So that is a different proposition for our staff. And I think the crucial thing for me is to bring staff absolutely with us on this. We know if this was to happen, there would be a level of disruption because you're merging a number of teams together. But again, to my earlier point, this is, in my view, the least disruptive of the options, because you have the fewer number of councils who are coming together into a new council into the future. And my point in terms of conditions, I think that's a really important one that you make there, Chair. There's another council who's one in the 2019 cohort of councils to be created. They only voted through this summer, councillors, the new terms and conditions for staff for that authority. So there'd been a 6-year period of that council operating a range of different terms and conditions. I don't know what I will be doing at that point, but I would have thought that whoever the head of paid services at that time would want a much more pacey level of terms and conditions to be pulled together. I would have thought at that period, 6 years feels a long time.
Yeah, thank you for that. Because I think in Bucks, they had some pay disputes after their local government reorganisation. So presumably we'll be taking opportunities to learn lessons from previous LGR exercises and hopefully not make the same mistakes.
Again, I'd say to that point on the disruption side of things, if you look at the Ridgeway and the two councils options here, you have fewer organisations coming together as one. So if you look at the Bucks, I think it was 4 or 5 district councils and the county council, whereas here with the Ridgeway, you have South and Vale, who already have so many shared services, ourselves, part of Oxfordshire County Council for one, and then for the Oxford and the Shires, you've got 3 districts plus the county council into one. So again, to that disruption point, that I'm not going to sit here and say that it wouldn't be disruptive, and of course it'd be a lot of work to go into that, but it's probably the least disruptive, I'd say.
Sure, thank you. I'm conscious with this discussion, obviously we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, and you could only want to do a certain amount of work because we don't know if it's going to happen. But I think what might be quite nice, and if the decision is made that we do go ahead, is to maybe do another scrutiny exercise at that point to go into a bit more detail. Because what I don't want us to do is come up with loads of things, oh, you should do this, you should do that and the other, and then it turns out it's not even going to happen. But also what I don't want to do is lose the opportunity for scrutiny to have influence over that process by not making recommendations now and then finding that we've missed the boat. So I don't know if other members concur with that. Yeah, okay. Mr. Holmes.
I don't really wish to be a hostage to fortune on this, so we can delete this from the YouTube clip and there'll be no minutes of it at all, Mr. Chard. But my feel is if the Ridgeway was to happen, it would probably be more than a task just for this scrutiny committee to be looking at. I think there would be a range of different committees looking at this, because some of it I think is in the transition arrangement here. It's going to be a really big task. And I think so. Welcome the eyes on it, but I think there's going to be a lot of member involvement in this.
And presumably we'd carry on with the devolution advisory group and give some thoughts to scrutiny and governance as a sort of handover process.
Well, so I given that devolution advisory group is Councillor Pemberton's group, I will leave him to speak to that. But I think in terms of the point around kind of scrutiny, I think if the government approves the proposals, then there would be a joint scrutiny committee that would be created from the existing authorities that would contribute, so that actually the committee gets to see actually all of those challenges across all of the areas, and actually the committee immediately starts to look at the larger geography and communities. And I'll hand over to Councillor Penn.
Would that be the case with governance as well? Would there be a joint governance group as well as a joint scrutiny?
I haven't seen that anywhere. Definitely joint kind of scrutiny. So I can take that away and check.
Yeah.
Scrutiny is the one that I have seen in the other proposals.
Sorry, if you go to it's page 147, sets out some of that in there.
I'm just conscious of issues around risk. It might be a good idea for us to consider having some sort of joint governance committee. Because I know other councillors have mentioned about risk being, something we need to be aware of. Yeah.
Yeah, I know it's your, sorry, Chair, I know it's your committee, absolutely. But from my side of things, I think there'd be a lot of value in that, because you're going to be, if you look at the focus of the governance committee, a lot of it's around external audit, the financial statements, internal audit, some of the sort of treasury management risk, overall risk management as well. I can see a lot of synergy, a lot of benefit from that, because you look at lots of the numbers that are included in here, there'll be kind of the numbers that the governance committee will recognise as well from a sort of asset side of things too.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Pemberton, you were going to speak.
Absolutely. In the meantime, Devolution Advisory Group will continue to do its work. My understanding is that the government's aspiration is for that wider Devo piece to happen in parallel with LGR. So in theory, you will start to see some movement on conversations around these strategic authorities and whether or not they have a mayor attached to them fairly soon. I don't think it's unreasonable to say that there's a huge piece of work ongoing here. There's a lot for government to work through, not just with Devo, but LGR. This isn't the only proposal that they're looking at, and we're not the only region impacted. But absolutely, there will be opportunities for members to feed into that Devolution Advisory Group. The conversations around Devo are certainly not as advanced as the conversations that we're having now around LGR. At some point, this council does have to decide whether or not it's going to submit an expression of interest for a strategic authority. At some point, there needs to be a thought piece around what that looks like, but we're not at that point yet. So there's a lot of preparatory work still to do, and I'm very, very keen for DAG to be front and centre of that.
Thank you very much. Going back to Councillor Reid's point about the parishes and the towns, I was just wondering, bearing in mind the financial challenges that the council faces at the moment, is there opportunity to talk to, particularly to the town councils, about whether there are any service areas that they might consider taking on in the future? Because I know this has been a discussion that's happened in other areas of the country. Have you had any discussions with them yet in that regard, or is that something that you would anticipate doing? Because presumably the earlier that conversation begins, the better.
Thank you, Chair. So one of the sort of reflections on that, I wouldn't say it's a finance specific thing. So to an extent, on a sort of part the sort of financial point here, but certainly in the last, I think, couple of parish town and parish conferences that we've had, Councillor Pemberton and the leader have raised, this is coming. It could be a big opportunity here for those town and parish councils who wish to take it. So, and I think there is reference in here in the paper. Given if this happens, the councils will be to a scale of 500,000 people. I think there is an enhanced role here for town and parishes to provide some of that greater localism. And you can see the government, and I'm sure Sarah will talk a bit about this, but you see the government's looking at that neighbourhood model, how exactly that would look. So I think there is a big opportunity. Again, the LGA have highlighted some case studies that they see have worked really successfully for new unitary councils. some of those new unitaries have very much devolved a lot of services down to town and parishes, and there have been some quite significant increases in town and parish precepts in those areas. Others have taken a different proposal. I think Wiltshire's one, which has been put up as a good, a good element of a sort of good practice from 15 plus years ago now, of engaging town and parishes, looking at areas. So there's lots of different models, and this would absolutely be an area which will look at what the government proposes with with a lot of interest, and secondly, I think there's a lot of really good practice out there around how would you design this. But yeah, I wouldn't see this as a financial issue. I think this is a wider, more fundamental issue as to sort of how democracy works at a local level.
Thank you very much for that. On the issue of the number of councillors that we've got, my understanding is that usually what happens is in the first term of the new administration, the Boundary Commission could be invited in to do a boundary review. And in Cornwall and Buckinghamshire, that actually resulted in a further reduction in the number of councillors. So is your understanding that we could be looking at fewer than 96 further down the road?
So I think when we did the initial, the interim proposal, I think we envisaged that there would be probably between 70 and 80 councillors for the population size that we were predicting. That was based on an analysis of other unitary authorities of that kind of size of sort of circa 500,000 residents. So we based that on kind of the information and learning of others. And in the proposal document, it does say that is something that we anticipate may happen within the first year, so in the first couple of years. I think it's fair to say that the Boundary Commission may be quite busy for a few years. So I think we don't know whether it will work. We think there is a proposal that will operate. It's below the maximum number of members that the sort of Electoral Commission suggests that a local authority should have. They sort of have 100 councillors as the upper limit, and Buckinghamshire, for example, I think they had about 150 for a while. So, if you think about the challenges of even just having 150 people in a chamber where people can participate in an effective way to that democratic process, I think that's why they recommend actually you need to have not quite as many. So I think it is likely that there would be a boundary review in due course. When that would be, we don't quite know with any certainty.
Okay, thank you. I think that goes back to the point that Councillor Reid made about the number of councillors and concern about how many people they might end up having to represent. I can understand why you would want a smaller council chamber, because would you have a place physically big enough to have everybody? But the flip side of that is the fewer people you have, the more workload there is for the councillor. I know, for example, at the moment, Councillor Hooker has 10 parishes in his ward. And the more you have, the bigger the risk that you physically can't get to some of them because they clash. But I recognise that's a problem across the whole country. That's not just something for us. I've got one more question, but does anyone else want to raise anything? Okay. The one thing I was going to ask, climate commitment. I'm conscious that we have got stuff in our strategic plan as a council about climate and sustainability. And I think the vision for Ridgeway statement on page 74, Vale and South have had full council meetings in the last few days where they've added some text about their climate commitment. And I wondered whether in the spirit of partnership, we might consider doing the same this evening. And then all three partners in that effort have got the same wording. It's quite a simple addition. So it's on page 74 where the paragraph starts, let me get this right. It says this council suggests amending. No, hold on. Is that the right bit? Sorry, I don't think I've got the right bit here. Right. The additional wording is deliver strong action on climate change and promote nature recovery. So it would literally just be a one-line addition to that page.
So to be fair, Councillor Culver, this was the very same issue that your colleague Councillor Marsh raised at full council the other week. And look, I'm all about the pragmatism. What I said on the night was that I didn't think it was necessary. I think the document that's in front of members covers off all of the areas that we've spoken about tonight. It covers off the risks, it covers the governance, it covers the finances. I think those issues, this is my personal view, I think those issues are already more than adequately provided for in our planning policies and in our local plan. At some point in the not too distant future, we're going to have to start thinking, all things being equal, about another local plan, right? So that's been my view all along. I don't think it's necessary, but I'm happy to concede it if that's what this committee wants to do, because my position is simple. Whatever we need to do that's sensible and helps the process and members are content with, we can add it and we can amend it. This must be member-led. I know that this is an executive function, and I know that it's executive that does the final sign-off, but we brought this through full council because we wanted to. We wanted to hear what members had to say across the piece, across the district, and I'm still interested in what members want to say. And if members have got something valuable to contribute, I would encourage them to do it. So that is my kind of olive branch, if you like. I wouldn't do it myself, but if that's what we decide, then I don't have an issue with that. I will just ask the officers to add if there's any sort of legal or governance reason why we cannot do it, but I'm content with it, certainly.
Yeah, so I think what will be important is this is a single proposal. So actually what we really need to work towards, and that's been part of the challenge in creating this document, and I think Councillor Pemberton alluded to it at full council, is that there are 5 councils have had to contribute to the development of this document. And I think in terms of that vision for Ridgeway, I think that there are multiple references to climate in here. I think there is a firm commitment actually to continuing that good work, and it references some of the work that West Berkshire already has been doing. But I think we need to have the same actually proposal going forward. So I think if that is resolved here, then that's the ideal, because then West Berkshire Council is proposing to have the same vision, if you like, that the other councils. So that uniformity really is what we need to continue to develop and produce in taking this to the final decision makers.
Because having passed that through their 2 councils, they presumably will be bringing that back to the table with you guys before you submit on the 28th of November. So that's going to be brought back to you anyway. So I think if other members are in agreement to just add that line, then all 3 councils are saying exactly the same thing, basically. I don't think we'd want to go into that discussion and say we don't agree with that line when the other 2 have passed it. I mean, literally all it is an addition to say deliver strong action on climate change and promote nature recovery. Councillor Cotton.
I think what Councillor Pemberton said, it's not really up to us as a scrutiny body to actually propose that.
We can make a recommendation if we choose to do so. It's up to executive whether or not they accept the recommendation, but scrutiny can make recommendations. Yeah.
So executive will sign this off later this week.
Yeah.
So I've got no issue with that recommendation going into the final papers that executive will consider, and then we can have that conversation there.
And
Therefore, would you say, yeah? I mean, if it's adding something, enhancing something, I certainly don't see a problem with that. I think as a humble scrutiny committee, we can say all 6 of us or whatever, or whoever says supports this, I would say we can make it as a recommendation, as I would say suggestion. I don't know what the legal terms would be. More suggestion than a recommendation, in my view.
We are entitled to make recommendations as we do at any meeting or any task and finish group meeting, but ultimately it is up to the executive whether or not it's accepted. Yeah. Did you want to say something, Ms. Clark?
No, I think I was just going to add, it's probably been covered, but I think the whole purpose of taking this proposal through both full council and then scrutiny is to have that full member contribution to it, and actually the fact that it's changed justifies potentially that kind of that process and the recommendations. That's the purpose of it being here, is so that this body can make recommendations to executive, who will be the ultimate kind of decision maker. But that's
Then, Chair, I would propose that we make that recommendation.
Great, thank you. I'll just run through a few notes I've made about recommendations, if I may, and then we can discuss whether or not we want to go ahead. So let's start with that one to begin with. Are people content to add that one line into the report? Yep. Okay. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Sumner, you mentioned about a study into the demographics of the consultation. Did you want to pursue that? Did you want to ask for further information about that?
I mean, it sounds like there are going to be further consultations. Mr. Holmes has already confirmed that there's some data out there. I think it's something that is worthy of note for any of the consultations that are held going forward. And I would emphasise the consultation element of it, because I'm conscious that what happened in Thiel, as was rightly said earlier on, was a poll, not binding in any way, despite what may or may not be said on social media. So yeah, where consultations activity is taking place, I think it's a worthwhile note.
Okay, great, thank you. And then I think the point that I made about when we know whether this is going ahead, if it's going ahead, that we look at this again at scrutiny and dive a little bit more into the detail. I'm conscious that I don't want to make lots of recommendations now and get ahead of ourselves, just in case the proposal isn't accepted by central government. So yeah, if we recommend, if we find out before, well, say we find out in Easter, then I think we should try and schedule a scrutiny before the summer and have a look at it. And if it's summer recess, just before the summer recess, maybe we can do something in the autumn.
So I think the government have, in their last letter, indicated that they would be consulting in the new year and that decisions would be made before the summer recess, with a view to kind of the sort of statutory orders being made in the autumn. And I think those orders will probably include reference to joint committees, etc. What that wouldn't preclude is some kind of joint working on an informal basis even before then. So I think there's been a lot of really good joint working to date. So there would be nothing to prevent chairs of scrutiny, for example, getting together in the first instance to start to look at what a work programme might look like. So I think we will know in the summer, and then kind of whether you make decisions then.
Great. Okay, so maybe we could have an item in the autumn then. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. We talked about housing and the need to get some more information from the portfolio holder. I think probably the best thing to do would be to have our item about social housing at the end of November. And Denise would be there and we could ask her questions and ask her whether she's started to give some thought to what we might do if this proposal does go through vis-a-vis council housing. Yeah. Has anyone got any other recommendations they'd like to make? Okay. May I be so bold as to say that we welcome the imminent recognition of Unison, and we think that that is a good move to make so that all of the staff members in a potential new authority are on an equal footing when it comes to negotiation. Would that have members' agreement? Councillor Sumner.
I think that's quite a political move, Chair, if I'm honest.
Fair enough.
I understand absolutely why you're saying it. I think there's a commitment which doesn't necessarily need to be union fronted. And potentially it falls off the back of your last statement, which is that all staff and all members need a very clear guide to, if you will, what this means for you. And I think therefore that would probably drive out an element of that clarity that I think you're trying to seek. For me, the union side of things might complicate matters more than they would clarify, in my experience.
Thank you. Councillor Pattenden.
I'm also not comfortable with the inclusion of that at this stage. I think it's premature, and as Councillor Sumner says, probably too political at this point of the process.
Okay. Any other views, members? No? Okay. I'm not sensing support for that. Right, just looking down the list to see if there's anything else in there that we need to capture. So Devolution Advisory Group would continue, which is to be welcomed. And to continue the discussion with the town councils. I think that's really, really important, just because of the possibility that they might be able to take on some more services in the future. And I know many people in this room have been members of parish or town councils or are currently members, and I'm sure would welcome that as well. So if we could make a recommendation to just keep on top of that, I think that would be good. Councillor Sumner.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And it's something that's been mentioned previously about looking at best practice. I think we know from, and I'm not going to start banging on about the Reading Borough Council situation again, but we know from the presentation that took place, certainly in Holybrook, that there is no parish framework within Reading Borough Council. So there was a commitment to continue the parishes that are in place. I think what we don't necessarily recognise is how the different parishes and different frameworks might actually be, and there's probably some best practice there that can come forward, and whether it's done through a parish conference or whether it's done through a series of conferences to actually increase awareness of what those best practice elements might be, so that the towns will probably be okay with some guidance. The larger parishes probably the same, but with the smaller parishes, I think we need to look at where there can be bigger networks, bigger support groups, even before boundary reviews come into effect. But you know, can for example a small parish be supported by a larger parish, or can 3 small parishes come together in a framework or a network that will do that? And I think there's a slight bolt on to what you're saying, but I think there's some wins there.
Yeah. Because I think in the document it says that Oxford and Shires might consider having engagement panels or community panels, and we probably wouldn't be looking to do that. But I think that relates to the point that Councillor Sumner's just made about perhaps it would be beneficial for some parishes to be part of something a bit bigger. I know some of the parishes that I'm aware of have not got a full complement of people. Others have, and have got a very experienced clerk, and they're up and running, and they're always applying for grant money and so on. So I know they're in different situations. Might we reconsider having those community panels maybe?
Yeah, so I think, so Oxford and Shires have talked about kind of creating neighbourhood kind of area committees. I think they have referred to them. The government have indicated that they want that kind of neighbourhood governance to be put in place. And I think reflecting quite possibly, the different models that exist across the country, because certainly we looked at lots of different areas. I think we've referenced Shropshire. Cornwall is another area that have really leaned into town and parish councils in terms of that neighbourhood governance. What the government said in their bill is that they intend to work with the LGA they've said that there will be secondary legislation. So actually, where we're talking about how we will create this, the government have also indicated that they intend to legislate what that framework will look like. So some of this will not be within the discretion of the new authorities. But I think what they have stated is that they intend to work with the LGA in order to learn best practice, so that when they create that kind of secondary legislation, they are going to in effect develop a model that will work across all areas of the country. So I think, and to some extent, I think this will be for the new authority to determine what that neighbourhood will look like. So to what powers are devolved. I think if some of the proposals that have gone forward create very extensive, or indicate that they would create extensive area committees, that they will delegate decision-making, contracts, kind of powers to those committees. I think that there is a balance to be struck in terms of what's delegated down, because what you don't want to do is create, in effect, a new network of district councils doing what district councils currently do. So it is about working with the communities, working within the legal framework that government will determine, But actually, yeah, relying on that. And I think, again, we were very keen not to prescribe in this document what that would look like, precisely because we are aware that some of our parishes are very small, some of our parishes struggle to kind of have members on there. So we've got to develop a system that works across all of those kind of bodies.
And sorry to come back on that. Thank you. That is helpful. I think for me, I'm probably thinking less about legislation and more about an arm around the shoulder. I'm thinking about what could be offered to those smaller parishes just to make them feel like they're not sliding backwards down a slippery slope. And that doesn't need legislation. That just needs some common sense approach to what can we do and what's the best way for parishes or towns to help each other. But totally take on board what you've said.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. And can I just ask what will happen with the final proposal? We've talked about the fact that there's a bit of a contradiction about election dates, and we've mentioned the climate. Is the final document that goes to government on the 28th of November, are we going to publish that somewhere that people can look at for their reference?
Yeah, it will be published and made available. I imagine there will be links on our website, but we've got the two council websites. So we kind of created that, the Ridgeway and Oxford and Shires. So certainly we can do communications. I'm sure we will do communications. We have, and in fact, the communications team, I think, have done an outstanding job on this and kind of reflected in the level of engagement with our communities. So when that document, the final version, is ready and is sent to government, that will be made available.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Any other questions, comments, recommendations from members? No. I'd just like to thank everyone who's come along this evening to present to us. Thank you very much, Councillor Pemberton. I think you've got the longest job title of any executive member, and I'm sure you've been working incredibly hard on this, and thank you very much to officers. I think it's a great piece of work. Lots of effort has gone into it, and it will be very frustrating, I think, if it's not accepted by the government, bearing in mind how much effort has gone in. Hopefully, the fact that many councils support the two authority proposal will be looked upon kindly by the government, one would hope, but it remains to be seen. So for the benefit of anyone at home, this has been discussed this evening. It will go to executive on Thursday, and the final proposal will go to central government on the 28th of November. Mr. Clark.
Just to clarify, it goes to executive on Wednesday.
Oh, beg your pardon, Wednesday.
The
Yes.
extraordinary.
Thank you. Wednesday the 12th. Fantastic. Great. Okay. So I will draw this meeting to a close. Our next meeting will be the 25th of November. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.